All right, welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Pearson. He just retired from Satellite Beach PD with almost 39 years in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Pearson. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Of course, you retired a couple months ago. It's looking good on you so far.
Okay.
We
Well,
talked
I don't know.
we talked a little offline, so it's been at the time of this recording, it's been about 6 weeks, so it's really new. How has it
It
been so
is.
far for you?
It kind of just feels like I'm on vacation. I still feel like I'm going to go to work Monday and have a whole lot of fires and messes to deal with because I've been off for a little while. It just hasn't really sunk in yet. But I think once the holidays are over, come whatever that Monday is on January 3rd or 4th or whatever it is, I'm probably going to wake up and look around and go, holy cow, what am I going to do now? But
Yeah,
I've got
100%.
stuff I've got irons in the fire, so I'll keep myself busy.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I could imagine it just doesn't feel real after 39 years
Right.
of working every day that you're like, now it's over. Now it's on to the next chapter. Can you give us a little bit of insight into what your career did look like? I know that you were with the same agency for almost 39 years.
Yeah. Very quickly, I'm one of the very few people, and I'm very, very fortunate for a lot of reasons, but this particular one is more unusual. I've found over the years that I've always known what I wanted to do
Mm.
since I was a kid, which from what I understand is very unusual. But when it happens to you, you just think it's normal, right? Like everybody knows what they want to do. So I actually went to try to get a job as a dispatcher, but I wasn't even 18 yet. And so the lady was actually getting ready to hire me, I believe, and she looked at my driver's license and went, "You're not even 18 years old yet." She said, "Get out of my office. Come back when you're 18." So anyway, I started as a dispatcher, working midnight shift when I was 18 years old, and then I put myself through the police academy. So I worked midnight to 8 and then got off at 8 o'clock in the morning, flew home, changed, had to drive over the bridge to be in formation for the police academy. Did that for 8 months and then worked for almost 2 years as a dispatcher and then went on road patrol and then just slowly ascended through the ranks. Went to college, got my bachelor's degree, my master's degree. Then I was fortunate enough to go to the FBI National Academy in Quantico, which was a huge, huge plus. And then in 2011, I got promoted to police chief, and then all with the same agency. And another thing that I realized along the way that was really important to a lot of people that I didn't realize was the community really liked the fact that I was homegrown and that I lived in the city and that I had been here and promoted from within. So, yeah, I mean that's pretty much in a nutshell that was it. Same agency, and I've done every just about every single job in the building, and I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. Yeah, I am really envious of you knowing what you wanted to do forever. I was so lost when I was younger. I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. Were you ever able to identify the why you wanted to enter into this career?
Wow, that is so funny. I've had that question asked to me only a handful of times. People, they don't really just skip over that, and I have been searching for an answer to that question for 39 years. And I really just truly honestly can't pinpoint why. My uncle, we weren't super, super close, but he was a police officer in Orlando at the Orlando PD. So when I was growing up, I mean, but like I said, we weren't even really that close, but that's the only connection to anything I come up with.
Yeah.
And I really just I don't know. I just don't know how or why, but I always did. And like you said, most everybody that I talk to, they find that fascinating and they all say the same thing. Oh, there's people that say I went to college, got a degree just to go to college to get a degree and didn't even know what I wanted to do. And then when I finally figured it out, it had nothing to do with the degree I just got.
Right.
And I think, wow, I'm very, very fortunate to be able to start that early because then I can retire
100%.
earlier.
Yeah. Well, and what I find really interesting is, this idea that you worked nights as a dispatcher. Before you were 18, you were like, sign me up, let's go, put me in coach, and then you were working yourself really hard for that period of time, working nights and then putting yourself through the academy. And so that's why I was, kind of curious what that intrinsic motivator was, because that's a lot for a young person to put themselves through and to have that dedication and motivation and that, kind of resiliency during that time to do such a hard thing for, I mean, 6 months is a long time to be doing something that challenging.
I it really, when I go back and look at it, I think, like you said, I go, wow, that's a lot. But now keep in mind, I was 18 years old. So at 18, you can do an awful
Stamina.
lot of stuff. I mean, if I tried to do that today to kill me.
Yeah.
So obviously that certainly helps when you're young. And really, I just, all I can say is I just wanted that. I just wanted it so bad. I would have done anything. And that is going to lead up to what another thing that you had mentioned you wanted to talk about is I just wanted it so bad I would have done anything.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to throw out because I just find it interesting is I happen to have a friend. I made friends with one of the guys that worked at the Satellite Beach Police Department. He was a sergeant. His son worked for the next city down, and he was more my age. So we kind of got to be friends. And I would talk to him about what's it like, and he would just get me even more jacked up about it by telling me stories and all that. Well, one day he said, now I was 16 when we first met, and he was 20, I think. Whatever, I don't, whatever. But he was working there as a police officer. He said, "Hey, what are you doing on Friday night?" And I said, "I don't know. I was just going to go out and hang out with my friends." And he said, "Well, I'll come pick you up and you can do a ride along." Now you can't do that at 16 years old. And he snuck over there to my house and picked me up. And I rode along with him at 16 years old until like 4 in the morning. And if I wasn't already hooked, I was absolutely positively 100% hooked. You could have said to me, "I'll give you a," and back then this was a lot of money. "I'll give you $100,000 a year to do almost any other job." And I'd have said no. And I took that job for $16,000 a year or whatever it was at the time.
Yeah. Do you
Just
think
always wanted
that
to.
do you think that like that drive, that passion was what allowed you to make it almost 39 years in this career?
Yeah, and 100%. And the cool thing was the passion and the drive, if it would start to wane a little bit, the next promotion was the thing that got me
Mm,
spun up again to get to do more and work harder to get that promotion. And then once I got the first one and saw what that was like, then I just kept thinking to myself, I just want to go all the way to the top. I want to be the person that because I kept seeing because remember back in those days, it wasn't like it is today. So you weren't treated right. I was stuck on midnights. I was told just shut up and mind your own business. Those the things you can't say to people now. That's the kind of stuff that and so not to say that people that I worked with were terrible people. A couple of them were not so wonderful, but it's just that's the way it was back then. And I just kept thinking to myself, if I ever get to a position of some authority, I'm not going to treat people like that.
yeah.
And I'm not going to do that. And so the drive was to just make the place better and make people feel better and not just be a jerk like these people were.
I think that, and I've had this conversation and I can relate to this, that you learn from how to do things, and you learn from how not to do things, right? You learn from good leaders, you learn from bad leaders. And I think that, arguably you learn more from what not to do. I think even in my personal life, I remember growing up, I had a really hard childhood and I didn't have great examples of, how to be in this world. And I remember growing up just being like, well, as long as I'm not like my parents, I'm gonna be okay. It was never like, okay, I know what to do. I told you, when I was younger, I was like, I have no idea what I want to do. But I was like, as long as I'm not like that, we're good. And so I think that you can learn a lot from people who you don't want to be like, because now you know the reverse. And I used to be so afraid that because I didn't have good examples in certain areas in my life, that meant that I wouldn't be good at other things. And I'll put this in maybe a really simple personal example. I convinced myself that because I didn't have a good mom or mother figure, she was really absent from my life. She was a drug addict and, really hard upbringing with her, and she left me when I was really young. I convinced myself that that meant that I wouldn't be a good mom. And now I realize that that's exactly why I would be a good mom, and so I think you can put that in the terms of leadership. You might not have good examples of leadership, and that's exactly why you're going to be a really good leader because you know what not to do.
Right. I'm a quote guy, and one of my favorites is more of leadership is caught than taught.
Mm,
And if you think about it, it's true. I could stand up in front of a group of people and I can teach them leadership for hours, but they'll learn a lot more by watching, well, exactly what you just said, by watching somebody that's awesome, that's just like, wow, I want to be just like her. She's just an absolute rock star, or holy cow. Because another thing about leadership and about people and about relationships is people don't care how much you know, they care how much you care.
mhm.
And people don't, they'll never remember what you did, they'll never remember what you said or what you had, but they will always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah,
Always.
I would say on both sides of the coin. If you made
Exactly.
them feel good or if you made them feel bad.
Right. Whatever the feeling is, they will always remember the way you made them feel.
100%. And so, in your opinion, and I'm kind of circling back to something you said earlier, do you think that development helps reduce or kind of counteract burnout in this career? Always trying to progress yourself and learn more. And, for you, it was rising through the ranks. Do you think that that helps with longevity?
It does. I think the freshness of different positions helps. The unique thing about this job is because every day is different, that does help as opposed to working on a factory or something.
Sure.
Um, but the other thing that I've learned along the way is not everybody wants to do what I do. See, again, when this is the way you are, you just assume everybody's that way, right?
Yeah.
Like in the beginning of my career, I just assumed everybody wanted. I thought I was competing with every single person in the department for sergeant. Well, in reality, there's a lot of people that have no desire to get promoted at all whatsoever. They want to come into work, they want to put in their hours, and they want to go home. And that's it. They want to do a decent job. They don't want to be a rock star. They don't want to be a problem enough to get themselves in a jackpot, but they just want to come and do their job and go home. They have no desire to be promoted. And it took me a while to realize that that's okay. That's absolutely okay. It's not me. It's not what I would want to do, but it's okay.
Yeah.
So development, going back to your question, yeah, it's important, but it depends on the person. Everybody's development is going to be different.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's the key to leadership is knowing what, see, I talk to people all the time and well, I don't want to get too
No,
far off,
go for
but
it.
I'll just finish this thought and then we can, but I talk to people all of the time, leadership, chiefs and whoever, and sergeant, let's use that. That's a better example. Sergeants, bigger agencies. And I'll say, hey, you're a sergeant with blah, 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 sheriff's office or whatever. And they'll say, yeah. And I'll say, how many people do you supervise? And they'll proudly say, I have 17 people in my command or whatever. And I'll ask them, how many of those people want to get promoted to your job, to be sergeant? And they'll go, all of them. I go, really? Every single one of those people has a desire to get promoted. And the point I'm making is they all don't. But the sad part of that is that particular sergeant I'm talking to has never talked to the people that they work with to find out what they want. How
Yeah.
can you supervise someone if you don't even know where they want to go because your job is to help them get there, wherever that is. But you got to know where that is in order to help them get there, or you're not doing your job.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good point, and kind of going back to what you said about we all have like our way of thinking and our way of doing things.
Right.
And we forget sometimes that when we're dealing with humans, it's always going to be nuanced. There's
Exactly.
always going to be different ways of teaching, of learning, of understanding, different goals and desires, different motivators.
Right.
And you almost have to be able to teach the same thing 100 different ways or have the same type of conversation 100 different ways. And it goes back to what you said, if people are going to feel valued if they feel seen, and they're never ever going to feel valued or seen if you're not taking the time to understand what motivates them and what their goals are.
Exactly. And that's what I tell people is if you haven't had an expectation meeting with the people that you work with, that you are missing the boat. You are
Yeah.
doing them a disservice.
What do you think, and maybe you've already mentioned it, but what do you think is the most valuable leadership lesson that you learned throughout your career?
Well, leadership is all about relationships. And I think the thing that it took me the longest to learn and even longer to accept
Mm.
was just don't take things personally. Because I mean, it's just human nature. If you and I work together for a long time, let's say we do these things 3 times a week for whatever, and we do and we build this relationship, and we get to know each other, and we talk about our personal lives, and blah 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 blah, and then all of the sudden, we think we're friends, but then I do something you don't like, or I make a decision that you don't like, and you speak out about it, or you talk to other people about it, or whatever, then I take that personally. Like, wait a minute, we're friends. I've been good to you for 10 years, and now all of a sudden, how come you don't have my back, if for lack of a better term?
Yeah.
And it's jarring because you just but that's just the nature of the beast. And it's sad, but it's what have you done for me lately? I mean, you can be good to people for 15 years, nothing but good, where they think you're the best thing ever until you do something they don't like or something that they think is not the right thing to do. And then that's it. They've flipped. And that's okay. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
But not taking it personally is difficult.
It is so hard. And like I felt a reaction when you were saying that because I have always been at my core like a people pleaser. I always wanted people to like me and to like think I was great. And I think for the very, I would say for the majority of my life, I really was like trying to do whatever I could to make everyone like me. And then I realized through like, perspective and older age, you start to mature and have different levels of understanding that no matter how great you are, you're never going to bat 100. You're never going to get
Never.
everyone who likes you, let alone loves you, right? And so I realized that I had to come to terms with the fact that I could, and I still am, always going to try to put my best foot forward, no matter what. I'm always going to try to make decisions that are fair. I'm always going to try to be kind and understanding and all the things, right? But at the end of the day, no matter what, there's always going to be people who maybe don't like you or don't agree with you. And I've struggled with that with my team and, things that I've done in my career, um, where I do feel like it's personal because I care about everyone, and you
Right.
want, and that is a really, really hard thing to do. But I agree with you. I think at some point you have to just try to make the best decisions that you possibly can and lead with kindness and then let the chips kind of fall.
That's exactly right. And really that's what all of what we've just said is broken down into what you just said. At the end of the day, you just make the best decision you can for the agency or for the team or for the company or whoever it is you're working for. You make the best decision you can for the company. And if it works out that it makes 80% of the people happy, great. If it makes 80% of the people mad, well, it was the right decision, and that's what I'm paid to do. And that's what you do. And as long as you can be comfortable with the decisions you made and you made them for the right reasons, where people get into a real problem, especially the higher they get, is when they start making decisions because of relationships.
Mm,
Like this person is always against me. This person's always treating me poorly, or he doesn't like me, or whatever. So now you say, well, even though that person is the absolute positive best person for this promotion, you don't promote that person because of your personal feelings, and then you promote somebody who isn't the best for the job, and now you just created yourself two problems. The Now the problem with the person that should have been promoted that didn't, and that person that you put there that wasn't the right person for the job because everybody in the building knows who's right for the job and who isn't.
Yeah.
It's not just you, they do. And that's where you start to get, that's where I've seen leadership, chiefs, sheriffs get in a big time problem is when they start making decisions based on their relationship with people and not what's right for the agency.
Yeah. I also, as you're talking, kind of was thinking about, kind of the other side of things too, of also being willing to understand when maybe the decisions maybe weren't the best, and being willing to hear people. And even if they're upset, even if the decision isn't going to change, how can you also have the ability to have conversations and to listen to how people feel about it without, like you said, taking it personally, but also being able to learn, not every decision that we make is always going to be the right one or the perfect one. Sometimes we are going to make mistakes. And how can we
Totally.
also have that like learner's mindset of understanding that, maybe I did make a wrong decision. Maybe I can do better next time. And so I think also having that ability to have a little bit of um, humility sometimes too.
Yeah, and that's important because there's the sunk fallacy, the something sunk. I can't remember the anyway, it's basically throwing good money after bad. When you make a bad decision, right? You make it and it turns out that it just was a bad decision. It happens. Everybody does it. Lord knows, I've made plenty of bad decisions. They weren't intentional. I didn't set out to make a bad decision. I made a decision with the information I had that I thought was right, and it just turned out that it wasn't. You got to be willing to own that, and
Mm,
you got to be willing to fix it if you can. The problem is, like I tell people all the time, a mistake only becomes an error when it goes uncorrected. So if you're willing to say, hey, and stand up in front of God and everybody and say, hey, my bad. That was a bad idea. I blew that. I'm going to do what I can to fix it. Then people are okay with that. They're willing to accept that. What they don't like and what they won't accept is when you make a bad decision, you know it, and everybody knows it, but you pretend like it wasn't a bad decision and you try to justify it and then you try to force it. And it's just never going to go well.
yeah.
It just isn't.
Yeah. We talked about this a little bit, and I do think that when you have a little bit of separation from things, you have a different perspective. And now that you've, entered into this new chapter in your life, it's been about 6 weeks.
Right.
Looking back on your career, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Yes. I think, I mean, there's a lot of little things like I can go back and say, oh, geez, I remember back when but I mean, everybody can do that. But
Sure.
the biggest one, the most profound one was just the work-life balance. I just wish, I wish I could scream this from the rooftops for everybody because, and by the way, let me say that as the newer generations begin to enter the workforce, they are they are getting better at it, and they're already way better at it than people from my generation were. So that is a good thing. So I think the trend is getting there. Now, I think sometimes the generations flip it; they take it too far the other way.
Mm,
But when I had first started out, all I did was work. I took every overtime. I did everything. I took every opportunity, every position, every shift. I volunteered for everything I possibly could. And in my opinion, the way I was brought up was if you want something, you have to work hard for it, which makes sense. And it's true. It's still true today. But you don't have to sacrifice, you don't have to give away the farm, as they say. You can balance it. I missed so many kids' birthdays and Thanksgivings and Christmases and soccer games and all those things over the years. And I didn't have to miss all of them. I might have had to miss a few, but if I could go back, I fully believe as we sit here today with all my heart that I still could have gone through the ranks and been promoted to police chief and had a successful career and almost 15 years as the police chief. I still could have done all that, but had a better balance and still had more time at home and been with the family more than I was.
Yeah.
And the younger generations, as they're getting there, they saw that and they've learned from that because their parents are telling them just exactly what I'm saying. But unfortunately, also the trend I'm seeing, not everybody, I'm not throwing a wide net here. They're also, it's the opposite. Now it's like, well, I'm going to live my life and I'm going to travel and I'm do all these things and I'll come to work whenever I can, right? And that's probably not great either. That's why the balance is perfect. And I didn't have it, and I just if people would measure what they want and how they can get there, but have a balanced life and career, they'd be a lot happier.
I appreciate that you said, because I don't ever think that anything's going to be equal. And so I really appreciated that you said, maybe I would have had to have missed some of it, right? That's kind of that imbalance, right? Maybe I would have had to have missed some of it, but I didn't have to miss all of it. And I've struggled with this too. I also grew up where it was like work ethic was everything, and I remember always, and I still do, I still take pride in this. I think two things can exist at once. I think that you can still take pride in your work ethic and still understand that sometimes it was a little bit too much, and um, I remember saying to myself, it was almost like a mantra or something that I would say to myself of, I might not be the smartest, I might not be the most experienced person in the room, but no one's going to outwork me. And that was always something that I took a lot of pride in. I was like, I am that person who will go and do all the things that no one else is willing to do to achieve the things that I want to do. And that was my life too for a really long time. It was just all career advancement, all work. And there are a lot of things that I also wish that I could go back and I could prioritize in my personal life with family members who are no longer here. You don't get that time back. And I think that if I ever do, get to the end of this and have any regrets, I think those would be some of my biggest regrets is not having that extra time with people who are no longer here, who I could have. And you're right. Like when you said that, I could have done that. It wasn't like everyone would have been okay if I didn't do
Exactly.
that extra event or if I didn't put in those extra hours. In some cases, everything would have been okay. No one would have even noticed. But in my head, I was like, what are they going to do without me?
Right.
I'm everything. I'm keeping this ship afloat. Like if I'm not there, the whole thing crumbles. And I realize now that that wasn't true. That was something I convinced myself of. And now not only did I not get the time, but they also didn't get that extra time with me too. So I agree with you. And I have asked myself that question a lot of, do I think that I could have gotten to the same place that I am now if I would have taken the time to also prioritize my family? I think the answer is yes. Do I think that it would maybe have taken a little bit longer? Maybe, but I agree with you. I think that you can have it all. And that was my question to you is, do you think you can have it all? And I think you answered it. Like, can you be super successful in your career and also super successful and present in your home life?
Yeah, and you absolutely can. But you have to pay attention and you have to really manage it properly. And you mentioned work ethic, and I just if you don't mind, I want to throw this out because I- so many people will say that from the older generation, and they'll complain about the younger generation, the Gen Zs and Gen X and Gen Y and millennial, whatever, and they'll complain and say that they don't have any work ethic. And actually, that's not true because when I, when I was coming up the ranks, there were no cell phones. There was none of that. So there was no email, there was none of that. So when I left work, that was it. I was done. If I had 2 days off, I went home. There was no work, there was no contact. There was other than if my house phone rang because there was an overtime call out and they were offering a shift. Other than that, that's it. Whereas today, they're connected 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So people that are Gen X they're home. It's 9 o'clock at night and they're answering emails and they're basically working all the time or connected all the time. I mean, how much more work ethic can you get than that, where you're never not connected to work? Whether it's you're checking the social media to see what's going on, or you're checking emails, or you're approving things, or sending things, or forwarding things. So, yes, especially now, because you're connected all the time, you can be at home with the family, but still,
Mm,
if I had the ability to be home for Thanksgiving, but yet have to take 5 minutes on my phone or take a quick phone call in the bedroom or something like that, but still be there, I would have loved that. But that option wasn't available. So I think if people take the option and they pay attention, they can absolutely they can have it both ways. They can have a very successful career, they can advance, they can get what they want, they can also have a very successful family and home life.
yeah. One of the saddest things that I that was told to me was someone who was in leadership. They were kind of getting to the tail end of their career. And they said, Paige, I'm scared to retire because I feel like a stranger in my own home. And I was like, whoa, it was kind of that moment where it was like, wow,
Yeah, that's a problem.
yeah, I mean, when you get to the end of this, like, the best case scenario is you have your family intact and you have years ahead of you and you feel good and you can enjoy the fruits of your labor, right? Like you want to get to the end of this and still have some resemblance of your life intact, when you do finally close that door. And my question for you is, how, because it sounds to me like you've set yourself up, you were able to retire early and now you're like, I don't have to work if I don't want to, and you're excited about retirement. And so how can someone proactively, as early as possible, start preparing for retirement so that when they do eventually transition into that next chapter into their life, that they have life and years and family still available to them?
Well, there's two parts to that. Um, One of them is financial, and just because I don't know that that's probably necessarily what you want to get deep into. So I'll just touch on it just enough
Yeah.
to kind of make a point and then go to the other side. But um, so many people they're young, they don't have a lot of money, they struggle to pay their bills, like all of us, like I did. I mean, I remember very distinctly sitting at the kitchen counter getting the mail, and I would go through the bills and decide who wasn't getting paid this month because if I didn't get a couple overtime shifts, I couldn't pay everybody. So I get it. I mean, I lived it. But if people can start financially investing a little bit or just putting a little bit of money away, um, an IRA or just anything, just a little tiny bit makes all the difference in the world. And it's one of those things. Once you do it, it only takes a couple of paychecks, and then that's just your new norm.
Hmm.
The problem is the initial, they look and go, I don't have any money. So how can I possibly do $50 a month or $20 a month or $10 a week or whatever? And I think that so many people that I talked to that did that because their parents taught them or because they're just smart enough to do it. Because you whatever if you here's the other thing, people get a pay raise so that they're making more money, but then at the end of the day, they still don't have any money left. Well, but you're making more than you were last week. So how is that possible? Because they just spend more. I
Yep.
mean, and that's if you invest a little bit or put a little bit of money aside, then that'll be your new norm. And then just slowly increase that as you get promoted or whatever. Because you talk about 30 years in a career and you started investing 30 years ago. I mean, we could go through all the numbers and all that, and I'm not going to bore you or anybody with all that, but that's one part of it.
Yeah.
The other part of it, though, which is setting yourself up for retirement based on what you just said, I'm a stranger in my own house. What I find, especially in law enforcement, is everybody, you get so consumed with the job that that's all you think about. That's all you talk about. All of your friends are cops, and it's just so all consuming. It becomes your identity. It becomes who you are. And again, I just was fortunate. I didn't do this on purpose. I would love to say that I did. I would love to say that I was smart enough and I learned and I knew this early in my life. It would be all a lie because it's just fortunate. But some of my very, very best friends who have been friends, I've been friends with for 40 years, have nothing to do with law enforcement
Mm.
at all whatsoever. So when you can balance the work life, like we talked about, and you have a life outside of the job where the job is not your complete and total identity, then it makes retirement a lot easier because that's a pretty profound statement when somebody says I retired and I'm a stranger in my own house. That's a problem. But that's a fixable problem. That's something that never should have been a problem.
Yeah.
And that's just making sure that when you're home, you're not constantly thinking about work, you're not talking about work, you're not hanging out with people that all they want to do is talk about work. Then that family life is going to be a whole lot better. And then you're not going to be a stranger.
Yeah. It's funny. And you talked a little bit about this before about like the younger generation. And I think every generation probably talks about the younger generation in some way or another. But
Of course.
I was in a briefing and I was, talking about wellness and being proactive. And there was a kid, he was probably like early 20s in the back, and he had like kind of laughed or made a joke or whatever. And, I asked him a question and he was like, "Oh, I'm really young. So, like, all this wellness stuff, like, I have time." And I, I can relate, like, and I think that it's so important for us to like remember how we were when we were younger. Everyone's different, but like, I can relate to being really young and feeling like I had a lot of time, and I think
Mhm.
that proactive anything is always going to be harder than reactive, right? Because like we're like, oh, that's a problem for later, or I have time, or, and there's like kind of this procrastination that happens. And then all of a sudden you blink and now you're older and you have an injury, or
Right.
you don't have any money in the bank, or, now you don't have a relationship with your kids or whatever that is. We can apply that to a lot of different scenarios. And so, to your point, and I think, anyone who's listening, how can we start as early as possible with these things? How can we, so that, and to me, it's like there's no negative to starting early, but there are negatives to not starting early. And so how can we convey that message of like, hey, like, what's it going to hurt? Like make your future self happy. How can you put in step? And if you haven't done that yet, and you are like in a position where maybe you're 10, 15, 20 years into the career, you can start today.
Yeah.
How can you be proactive today for tomorrow? And so I think that the message of it's never too early, it's also never too late to start doing these things in a proactive way so that your future self is happier.
And I just want to throw this out too, because money and time are the same thing. When you talk to people, you will hear two things from people always. I don't have the money for that. I don't have the time for that.
Mm.
Well, in reality, if they make if they force it, they can. And it's a friend of mine gave me this example, and it was I loved it, and I stole it, and I've been using it ever since. It's the water heater problem, and this is a time issue. So people will tell me I don't have the time to whatever it is, spend time with the family or do whatever they like to do, or their hobby, or work out, or whatever.
Mm.
And I'll say to them, if you were at work and you got a call at 2 o'clock in the afternoon that your water heater broke and it's flooded your garage, you would get home and you would fix it. You would get it worked out. You'd get it cleaned up. Then you'd call the repairman, and that person would come over and they'd say it's going to be $500, and you need to be here tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and you'd be there and you'd pay them and you'd get the water heater fixed. Well, wait a minute. But if you didn't have the time, then how did you do that? Well, because you made the time.
Mm.
And it's the same thing with money, like I talked about. I don't have any money. Well, if you just start putting $50 a paycheck away, then guess what? That's what you make now, is you make this much, which is $50 less. And you'll work it out. Just
Yeah.
like if the water heater breaks, you're going to get it fixed because you're going to make the time for it.
Yeah.
And when you think about it that way, it's true.
Yeah.
Most of the time when people say I don't have the money for that, what they really mean is I choose not to spend my money on that.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's, someone had said this too. I steal a lot of things too. I borrow from, things
Oh
that
yeah.
people say. But there was a chief that was telling his team, he's like, you put your time and energy into things that you prioritize, things that are a priority to you. And so I think it's not, I agree with you. I think that those are excuses. It's not that you don't have time. And maybe money is tight and maybe you are really busy. Those things can also be true,
Of
but
course.
it's a reprioritization of those things. And, you see, I don't want to say kids because I think everyone's doing it now, but if you have time to scroll on Instagram or watch TikTok videos,
Oh my
you
God,
have
right?
you have time to go work out or to go on a date night with your partner. If
Or
you have
spend some time with your kids instead of
yeah,
instead of they're playing in the room with their toys by themselves while you're watching TikTok videos.
100%. It's what I think it takes the time. And I remember, and I actually have been thinking about this a lot. So I also grew up where we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have social media, we had landlines, like we had time to think, we had time to be bored. And I thought when you were bored, you were more creative or you put your energy into different things. And now, because I think we're all so busy and so distracted, we don't have that time, that space to think and sit because we fill our time, right? And so I think it just takes you carving out the space to sit with yourself and identify what are your priorities, what are your short term, mid-term, and long term goals, and how are you going to make those things happen? What are those actionable steps that you're going to do today or tomorrow? I don't like to say tomorrow because then we always push off for tomorrow. Today to put those things in place so that you can set yourself up. But it's like you have to sit with yourself and you have to identify what are my priorities. And then you put your time and your energy into the things that are important to you.
If you want it bad enough, you will find a way to pay for it, and you'll find the time to get it done. It's really just that simple.
100%. My final question for you, and you've already given so many words of wisdom and little nuggets of advice, but if we could kind of recap everything, what words of wisdom would you share with someone who is earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known or something that's helped you along the way.
Well, I think the biggest thing is you got to be who you are. And I know that sounds easy, but a lot of people see someone who's great and they want to be like that person, or they think that they need to be a certain way because that's the way their supervisor wants them to be, or the chief or the sheriff or the command center, whatever. And when you start trying to do things because you think that's the way other people want you to be, you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Mm,
And I tell people all the time, just work hard, be honest, and do the right thing. And you'd be shocked at how far that will take you. Simply just that. But you have to do it for the right reasons. If you do something to get something, that's not the right reason.
mm,
And I have had a guy at work who was a rock star at things that would make him look good or get accommodation or get an award or whatever. But you mentioned this in the beginning of this conversation. But if you ask him to do the the dirty work that isn't sexy, that isn't fun, that isn't going to get you accolades, he wouldn't do that. Or if he did, he wouldn't do it well because he didn't care about it. He just cared about the fame and the accolades.
sure.
That's what I looked for, and that's what I did without even knowing it. I always, whatever I was tasked to do, I did it as good as I possibly could. I wasn't looking to get a reward or accommodation. If that happened, it was great. But too many people get focused on that. And if I could share those words to say, success is just always doing the best you can at whatever it is you're doing, but because you want to, not because you think it's going to get you something. I talk about people all the time. They'll say, well, I'm going to do this because I have a good chance of getting promoted. Well, if you're doing things just to get promoted, it's not going to work because you're not doing it for the right reasons. Do what you need to do for the right reasons, and the promotions will happen. And I guess that and the balance thing I talked about. But if you if people just are good to people, they're honest, they're hardworking, and they care about people, they will go so much farther than if they try to force all these other things. It's kind of like trying to play the stock market. If you try to buy this stock and buy this stock and play this and do that, if you try to beat it, you're going to lose. If you just put your money in there and let it go, you'll be fine. If you just go to work and be you and do your job, do it well, do it because you want to do it well, do it because you like it, and do it because it's the right thing to do, and just keep doing it. And then you don't have to think about anything. You don't have to try to figure it out. You don't have to try to second guess. You're just being yourself. Care about people because you truly care about them, not because you're supposed to care about them.
Mm.
Do we know those people? Have you met those people where they they'll come up and say, "Hey, how you doing? How's the family?" And you go, "Oh, well, my dad's." "Oh, well, okay." And then they move on, and you're like, "Wait, you asked me about how my dad was doing, and then you really didn't listen to the answer or care." They're just saying that because that's what they're supposed to say.
Hmm.
If you truly care, people know that. And it's not a difficult thing. But if you don't, then don't fake it. Just be respectful, be polite, and move on. And that's okay too. You can't be best friends with everybody. But I just it's really just comes down to just doing the right thing for the right reasons. It's not hard. Leadership isn't hard. Work isn't hard. People make it hard because they try to second guess everything and they try to be somebody they're not. And it's never going to work.
I love it. And, kind of just a comment on that. You described one of my biggest pet peeves is when people do that, when they're like, "How are you?" And I'm like, "Oh," and I try to answer and they're already walking away from me.
Yeah.
It is one of my biggest pet peeves. This is why I also can't stand going to like mixers or networking that's like very surface level, like where it's like, "Hi, how are you? Good, how are you?" And like no one really cares, but it's just like you're saying it to say it. Biggest pet peeve, I will walk out of the door so fast when that starts to happen. And because that's a pet peeve of mine, I'm not always perfect, but I try to do my best every time. If I'm going to ask the question, I make sure that I have time to receive the answer. If you don't have time to receive the answer to your point, you don't have to ask the question. You
Exactly.
can smile, you can say hi, and you can pass by. But if you're going to ask someone, "How are you?" be prepared to take the time to listen to that response because that response might be long. Someone might
Yeah.
not be doing well, and they want to tell you about it. And so make sure you have the time and the awareness because to me, that is my biggest pet peeve. So I really appreciate you saying that. And um, I also like this idea of celebrating the individuality of people. I did the same thing in my career where I really tried to be like my mentor. And I thought that if I was exactly like him, that would make me successful. And then I had someone tell me, they were like, "No one's going to be a better him than him." People are going to gravitate towards you because of who you are. And it really resonated with me. And I think, exactly what you said is like, do your best, work hard, have the best intentions always. But like, try not to be someone who you're not. Celebrate your uniqueness, and people will appreciate the authenticity of who you are. Because I think people can sniff it out if you're trying to be someone you're not.
And that's a perfect way to close it out is exactly that. People think they're fooling people. Oh my God. People think there's other people are so stupid and that they can fake everybody out and it's just absolutely they can sniff it out. If you're not authentic, if you're not who you are, whoever that is, people appreciate the fact that you're real. and that they know exactly where you're coming from and they know exactly where they stand with you. We all know those people that they're your very best friends when they need something from you, and then all of a sudden they move on and now you're like nothing to them. Well, wait a minute, but what about all of this friendship and all for no, because it was all fake. It was because they needed something from you.
Yeah. That
And
makes
if
sense.
people know where they stand and they know that you're genuine and true, then they will gravitate to that. And
100%.
they'll appreciate that more than you could be the smartest person in the world. And when I teach, I use this, and it seems to really people seem to like it. If you look at an iceberg, right? So half the iceberg is underwater, obviously. The top of the iceberg, that's what you can see. That's skill.
Mm,
People can see the skill, they can see the knowledge, but what's below the iceberg is character. You
mm,
can't see it, but that's what'll sink you every time.
Wow. I like that. Thank you. Thank you for coming on here today and sharing your insights and perspectives. And best of luck to you in this new chapter. I'm
Thank you.
excited to see where you go and what you do, and I hope you'll stay in touch.
I'm sure I will. And I listen, I want to tell you, I appreciate the opportunity. It was really, really nice talking to you. It's really nice being able to say some of this stuff and get it out there. And if one person listens to it and changes something or does something better because of it, then it'll all be worth it. So I really appreciate the opportunity. You're an outstanding person. You do great things, and what you're doing is just helping so many people. And I appreciate it. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. That really means a lot. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.